I watched my daughter-in-law throw my son's wooden box into the well and then walk away. I crept closer and heard a faint sound coming from the depths. I hope I'm wrong, I whispered. I pulled the rope, opened the box, and felt my heart stop. What I saw inside made me tremble. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge. I want to know how far it has reached. It's late now, and the heavy air feels like it's crushing my chest. My small home is steeped in silence, broken only by the steady tick-tock of the wall clock. Sleep has become a luxury since the day they took Daniel, my son. I haven't been able to close my eyes. Tonight is no different. I lie awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, my mind swirling with unanswered questions. Finally, I decide to go down to the kitchen, hoping a glass of cold water will calm me down a bit. I walk slowly, my old slippers shuffling against the hardwood floor. The kitchen is dark, only a faint light from the hallway seeps in. I open the cupboard to grab a glass when I hear a small click in the backyard. A sound so slight I would have ignored it another time, but now it makes me freeze. I clutch the glass in my hands. Then I hear the crunch of gravel as if someone is walking outside. My heart pounds faster. A feeling of uneasiness presses against my chest. I turn off the kitchen light, not wanting anyone to notice my presence. I cautiously approach the window and pull back the curtain just enough to peer out without being seen. The porch's yellowish light faintly illuminates the old well at the back of the yard. And there I see her. Camilla, my daughter-in-law, is alone, wearing a silk nightgown, her hair loose falling down her back, swaying gently in the night breeze. Her demeanor is strange. She doesn't look like someone who just stepped out for air. I hold my breath. In her arms, she's holding something small, pressed tight against her chest. When the light catches it, I recognize the object, an old oak wooden box, the same one Daniel had since he was a boy, where he kept his marbles, some old coins, and papers written in his childhood handwriting. My heart clenches. Why does Camilla have that box, and why is she out here at this hour? I want to rush out and ask her, but a hunch stops me. She doesn't move quickly. She looks around, vigilant, as if afraid someone might see her. Her caution sends a chill down my spine. When she seems convinced she's alone, she leans over and opens the well's lid. Her movements are slow, careful, avoiding any noise. Then she lifts the box, looks at it one last time, and lets it drop. A faint splash is heard, almost imperceptible. I stand frozen, my hands pressed against the window, trying not to tremble. Camilla doesn't leave right away. She replaces the well lid calmly, as if completing a ritual. Then she straightens up, takes a deep breath, adjusts her hair and nightgown, and walks back toward the house. Her expression is tranquil, as if she hadn't just thrown one of her husband's most cherished possessions into a well. I flatten myself against the wall, hearing her steps approach the back door. The door opens and closes softly. I wait a few more minutes, only daring to exhale when I hear her bedroom door shut. I can't stay still. I need to know what's going on. I put on a light sweater and go out to the yard. The night air is cold and damp. I approach the well and kneel by the edge. That well has been there since before my husband and I moved in. Now it's just a deep hole filled with dark water. I lean my ear in, trying to hear something. A few seconds pass, and I hear a slight thud, as if the box hit the well wall. The sound crushes my soul. Why did Camilla do that? What was in that box that she needed to hide in the middle of the night? I couldn't remain inactive. I went into the shed and found the old rope and the iron hook that Daniel used to pull up buckets of water for the plants. My hands trembled as I tied the hook to the rope and lowered it into the well. The cold water soaked the rope, making it heavy. I pulled and released it again and again, trying to snag the box. Every time the rope tightened, I hoped I had caught it, but it only came up with a few strands of algae. Sweat ran down my forehead despite the cold night. Calm down, Rosa, you have to get it. For Daniel, I whispered to myself. Finally, after several tries, the hook hit something hard. I bit my lip and slowly pulled the rope. The wooden box appeared soaked and heavy with water. I placed it on the grass, breathing heavily in the dim light of the porch. I saw the familiar grain of the wood. The box was intact, only with a few new scratches. I picked up a nearby stone and forced the lid open. My hands trembled so much I almost dropped the stone. When the lid opened, what I saw inside froze me. They weren't Daniel's old toys, his marbles, or as little papers as I had seen before. It was something else, something that made my heart stop. 3 days earlier, when I still thought my family was at peace, the first rays of morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow on the loaves I was kneading for the bakery. Making bread wasn't just my job, it was my joy, my way of keeping my mind busy. The smell of flour and yeast filled the air, bringing a sense of familiar calm. Daniel had already gotten up early. He was sitting at the table in his dark blue electrical engineer's uniform, work boots placed next to his chair. He was flipping through the newspaper, occasionally taking a sip of his coffee with a distracted look. I looked at him and my heart felt warm. Daniel was always a good son. Since he was a child, he helped with everything, from repairing neighbors' pipes to sweeping the yard every afternoon. He never complained, even though his engineering job wasn't easy. Seeing him sitting there, I thought I was a lucky woman to have a son like that. Camilla was quietly preparing breakfast in the corner of the kitchen. She was slicing tomatoes with slow movements, but I noticed something strange about her silence. Every day, Camilla used to talk to me nonstop about work or ask for recipes. But that morning, she was quiet, looking down, as if lost in thought. I thought perhaps she was tired or worried about something, so I didn't ask. I just placed a plate of warm bread on the table and smiled. Eat up. I made bread with orange marmalade today. See if you like it. Daniel looked up and smiled softly. Thanks, Mom. With this smell, I'm sure it's delicious. But Camilla only nodded without a word, her gaze fleetingly passing over me like a shadow. I found it odd, but before I could think more, a sound interrupted my thoughts. Firm, formal knocks echoed from the entrance, shattering the morning calm. The three of us froze, looking at each other. Who would come at this hour? No one in the neighborhood usually knocked on the door like that. Daniel got up, wiped his hands with the cloth on the table, and went to open the door. Camilla and I followed him, our hearts beating faster, though we didn't know why. When the door opened, two men in police uniform stood before us. One was older, serene-looking, and his badge read, Agent Rodriguez. The other was younger, with a notepad in his hand, and a sharp gaze that swept over all of us. Agent Rodriguez spoke in a polite but cold voice. Sorry to bother you so early. Does Mr. Ethan Sterling live here? Daniel nodded, somewhat nervously. Yes, that's me. Is something wrong, Agent Rodriguez? The agent looked him directly in the eyes without the slightest hesitation. We regret to inform you that Mr. Wallace Thorne, your manager, passed away at the office last night. The entire world seemed to stop. The coffee cup in Daniel's hand trembled, almost dropping to the floor. I watched his face go pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. Passed away? What? What happened? His voice cracked as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, trying to stay calm, although I felt twisted up inside. Camilla was behind us, silent, not uttering a word. Agent Rodriguez took a deep breath and his voice became serious. We are investigating the case as a possible homicide and we need your cooperation. The word homicide felt like a dagger straight to the chest. How was that possible? Mr. Thorne was Daniel's boss, a strict but fair man according to what my son always said. I squeezed Daniel's shoulder, seeking an explanation, but my mind was blank. Daniel shook his head, his voice trembling. It can't be. I don't understand. I just worked for him. The young officer intervened with a sharp tone. According to the security system, your access card was the last one used to exit the building, but at 9:05 p.m. The incident is believed to have occurred shortly before that time. Daniel froze as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown on him. No, that's not true, Teddy shouted, almost clenching his fists. I stayed late because Mr. Thorne asked me to check the hallway lights. When I finished, I left immediately. I didn't do anything. I could feel the panic in his voice. Daniel wasn't one to lie. Since he was a child, he had been an honest, dutiful boy, meticulous about everything, no matter how small. Agent Rodriguez observed him for a moment, then looked at me, and finally his gaze rested on Camilla for just a second. But it was such a penetrating look that a shiver ran down my spine. Just then, a metallic clang broke the silence. The spoon Camilla held in her hand fell to the floor, rolled a couple of times, and stopped. We all turned toward her. Her face was pale, her eyes wide as if she had been caught doing something. She quickly bent down to pick it up and stammered, Sorry, it slipped. I looked at Camilla, and an indescribable feeling ran through my chest. She had always been a careful person, never clumsy enough to drop something. So why did she flinch just when the officer mentioned the security system? Agent Rodriguez didn't say anything more about Camilla. He just turned back to Daniel. Mr. Sterling, we need you to come to the precinct to give a statement. It's just procedure, but you need to come right now. Daniel nodded, although I clearly saw his hand shaking. He turned to me, his eyes full of worry. Ma, I'll be fine. Don't worry. But his voice couldn't hide his fear. I took his hand firmly. I'm coming with you. I won't let you go alone. Camilla finally spoke in a soft voice. Daniel, go. I'll go with you too. But she didn't look him in the eyes. Her gaze drifted away as if she were trying to hide something. I wanted to say something, but Agent Rodriguez had already signaled for Daniel to follow him. I quickly grabbed my coat and walked behind my son, my heart heavy. For the first time, a real sense of unease began to grow inside me. When we arrived at the precinct, we were led to a small waiting room. The white fluorescent light fell on us, making everything look pale, the gray walls, the worn wooden table. I sat on a hard bench, clutching the handles of my purse, trying not to tremble. Daniel sat next to me, hands clasped, staring fixedly at the wall in front of him. Camilla was a few feet away, in a chair in the corner. She wasn't looking at us, just keeping her head down, running her fingers over her ring repeatedly, as if trying to calm an inner fear. Agent Rodriguez appeared as serene as when he was in front of my house. He invited Daniel into a private room to take his statement. It's just a procedure, Mrs. Sterling, he told me kindly, though not kindly enough to calm my heart. I nodded, trying to smile, but I must have looked tense. Daniel got up and looked at me with concern. Mom, I'll be fine. Don't worry so much. I squeezed his hand, trying to speak calmly. I know you didn't do anything wrong. Take it easy, son. But when the interrogation room door closed behind him, I felt as if a huge stone was crushing my chest. Camilla and I remained in the waiting room. The clock on the wall marked the seconds with a constant tick-tock, and each one sounded like a blow to my heart. I tried to speak to her gently. Camilla, are you all right? You look pale. She looked up, her eyes momentarily frightened, and then quickly smiled. Yes, I'm fine, Mom. I'm just worried about Daniel. But that smile didn't reach her eyes. About 30 minutes later, the interrogation room door opened. A young officer led us to another room, smaller and colder. There was only a metal table in the center, some rough chairs, and a large mirror covering almost an entire wall. I knew it was a one-way mirror from where they were observing us. Des. Daniel was there, exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. Agent Rodriguez sat opposite him with an open notebook, his pen softly tapping the table. They asked us to sit down. I pulled my chair closer to Daniel, placing a hand on his shoulder, trying to give him some comfort. Camilla sat on the other side, away from us, her gaze still evasive. Agent Rodriguez began in a measured voice. Mr. Sterling, you've already recounted your schedule for that night, but I want you to repeat it one more time so we can confirm. Daniel inhaled deeply, his voice slightly hoarse. I arrived at the company at 6 p.m. I checked the fuse system in the basement and then went up to the 4th floor to change some burned-out light bulbs. Mr. Thorne asked me to do it before I left. When I left, he was still in his office, the door ajar. He waved to me without saying anything else. I went straight home. I listened to every word of my son's with a heavy heart. Daniel never lied. I knew it. But the young police officer standing next to Rodriguez frowned with a look of suspicion. He wrote something down and then looked up. Mr. Sterling, are you sure nothing out of the ordinary happened? No argument, no disagreement with Mr. Thorne? Daniel shook his head, his voice firm. No, sir, I just did my job. Seeing the doubt in the young officer's expression, I couldn't contain myself any longer. I spoke, my voice trembling but trying to remain calm. Gentlemen, my son has been a good boy since he was small. The neighbors around here call him when a pipe breaks or there's a short circuit. He never accepted a cent, not even a glass of water. A boy like that, but how could he be involved in something so terrible? I looked directly into Agent Rodriguez's eyes, hoping he would see the sincerity in my words. Daniel is not someone who would cause harm. You have to believe him. Agent Rodriguez nodded. His gaze softened a little, although his voice remained firm. Mrs. Sterling, I understand how you feel, but we need to clarify every detail. He turned to Daniel and continued, Mr. Sterling, was your relationship with Mr. Thorne truly good? Have there been no conflicts lately? Daniel immediately denied that it. Absolutely not, sir. He was a good boss. I have no reason to be upset. His voice sounded sure, but I noticed him clenching his hands under the table, trying to control his tension. At that moment, a faint voice interrupted the tense silence. Excuse me, Agent. All eyes turned toward Camilla. She was sitting there, her shoulders shaking slightly, her head bowed, her voice cracked as if she was about to cry. I felt my heart stop. What was she going to say? Why was she apologizing? Camilla took a deep breath and looked up at Agent Rodriguez, her eyes bright with tears. Gentlemen, I remember a few days ago Daniel came home very upset. He said Mr. Thorne hadn't paid him the project bonus for almost 2 months. He was very angry. Her voice trailed off as if every word cost her effort. The atmosphere in the room froze. The young officer lowered his head and began to write nonstop, his pen racing across the paper. Agent Rodriguez looked at Daniel, his gaze growing sharper, as if he had just found a key piece of information. I turned to my son. I saw him paralyzed, his mouth agape, unable to speak. Then he turned to Camilla, his voice choked. Camilla, what are you saying? That was just a misunderstanding. The next morning, he explained everything and apologized. You know that well. But Daniel's explanation sounded weak at that moment. The fact that he hadn't mentioned anything earlier made his words sound like an excuse. Agent Rodriguez nodded, wrote something in his notebook, and then looked at Camilla. Mrs. Sterling, are you sure about what you just said? It's an important detail. Camilla nodded, her hands clasped under the table, her voice trembling into a whisper. Yes, I'm sure. I just want to tell the truth. But as she spoke, she lowered her head, her shoulders shaking. She seemed like a distressed wife forced to reveal her husband's secret. I looked at her, and for the first time, something didn't quite add up. Under the table, her hands were so tense they had turned white, her nails digging into her palms. It wasn't the gesture of someone who was simply nervous. It was the gesture of someone who was afraid or hiding something. The interrogation ended. Agent Rodriguez let us go, but I knew everything had changed. A week after the interrogation at the precinct, my house was engulfed in an unbearable silence. Laughter, conversations, the sound of dishes at family meals were now just memories. Daniel was visibly thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, and all light was gone from them. He spoke little. He sat in a corner with a cup of cold coffee in his hands, staring at the empty yard. Camilla continued to act like a devoted wife. She got up early, prepared nutritious broths and soups for Daniel, chicken soup with herbs, red bean porridge. She spoke to him sweetly, asking him to rest, to eat well. But I felt an invisible wall between them. Daniel only nodded, ate a few spoonfuls, and returned to silence. Camilla maintained a forced smile, avoiding my gaze every time I watched her. I wanted to believe that she genuinely cared for him, but after what happened at the precinct, after her words that turned Daniel into a suspect, my heart couldn't be at peace. Why had she said that? Why put my son in danger? Every time the phone rang or a car drove past the gate, we all jumped. I began to fear those sounds, fearing they would bring bad news. And then one rainy afternoon, what I feared most happened. The rain fell heavily, beating on the shingles, drowning out every other noise. I was in the kitchen, half-heartedly kneading bread, when the door knocked, dry, firm knocks. I felt a hollowness in my chest. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to open it, my heart pounding. Agent Rodriguez and a young officer were there under a soaked black umbrella. Rodriguez's face was serious, without the kind tone of the previous time. He showed me a paper with a red seal and said formally, Mrs. Sterling, based on the evidence and testimonies collected, we have an arrest warrant for Mr. Daniel Sterling to continue the investigation into the case of Mr. Thorne. I felt a buzzing in my ears, as if the world were collapsing. No! I cried out, clinging to Daniel's arm as he stood paralyzed beside me. You're wrong. My son is innocent. He didn't do anything. My voice broke, tears blurring my vision. Daniel didn't resist. He only looked at me, his eyes full of pain. Mom, I didn't do anything. Please believe me. His words tore my soul apart. Camilla was in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall, crying silently. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. She looked like a shattered wife, but her eyes, my God, her eyes were empty, lifeless. She didn't run to Daniel. She didn't scream. She didn't try to stop the police as I did. She just stood there, watching as if she were a spectator of a sad play. When the officers put handcuffs on Daniel and led him to the car, I fell to my knees, covering my face with my hands as tears soaked my sleeves. That's when Camilla approached, lifted me from the floor, and murmured, "Mom, please calm down. We'll find the best lawyer for him." But her voice was cold, without a trace of warmth. I looked into her eyes, and for the first time, I felt a real fear. Not fear of the police or what was happening, but fear of my own daughter-in-law. From that day on, I decided to observe Camilla more closely. I no longer saw her as a daughter-in-law, but as a stranger living in my house. The silence that reigned in the home became even more suffocating. Every night when I went to bed, I heard her footsteps going back and forth in her room. Once I couldn't resist and opened my door. She was in front of her laptop, the blue light illuminating her tense face. She typed quickly, stopped, and looked toward the door as if afraid of being discovered. I closed the door, my heart pounding in my chest. What was she doing? Why was she acting so secretive? Camilla began to have strange calls. She would go out onto the balcony or lock herself in the bathroom to talk. Every time she saw me, she would flinch, hang up immediately, and smile awkwardly. "It was just a coworker asking about something, Mom." But I didn't believe her. One night, when I went down to the kitchen for water, I heard her hurried voice behind her ajar fourth-floor door. "I've done my part. When will I get the rest of the money? Don't call me again. It's too dangerous." The glass almost slipped from my hands. I stood motionless, holding my breath. Money, danger, what was she talking about? Did those calls have anything to do with Mr. Thorne? I had no answers, but I was sure of one thing. My daughter-in-law was hiding a terrible secret. In the days following Daniel's arrest, Camilla changed completely. She woke up before dawn and didn't return until late at night. She always had an explanation. "I'm working at an upscale restaurant, Mom, to pay for Daniel's best lawyer." She even showed me a glossy card from a famous law firm, as if to demonstrate her dedication. I nodded and smiled, but the distrust wouldn't go away. Her words sounded credible, but her evasive gaze and forced smile kept me from fully believing her. One afternoon, while cleaning her room, I found a crumpled receipt in the wastebasket. It was from an expensive bar downtown, with a time that exactly matched when Camilla claimed to be working at the restaurant. The amount was high, enough to make me tremble. How could someone who claimed to be a simple waitress spend so much? I held the receipt with a trembling hand, searching for a logical explanation. But the more I thought, the more my chest tightened. Camilla became unusually possessive of her phone. She always kept it silent, screen down, as if afraid someone might see it. Once, as I passed the dining room table, I saw the screen light up with a message. I didn't mean to look, but my eyes caught a word. Partner. Camilla had never mentioned any business or a partner. She worked in the administrative department of Daniel's company, a common office job. So who was this partner? I wanted to ask her, but every time I tried, her suspicious gaze made me back down. She also flinched at everything. Once, while cutting vegetables in the kitchen, the knife slipped and fell to the floor with a loud clang. Camilla, who was in the living room, screamed as if someone had attacked her. I ran to her and asked worriedly, "Are you okay? Did something happen?" She clutched her chest, pale as a sheet, and shook her head. "No, Mother, I'm fine. I just got scared." But her terrified look betrayed her. I stood there watching her, with the feeling of being in front of a complete stranger. About 2 weeks after Daniel's arrest, on a rainy and windy night, I couldn't sleep. The drumming of the drops on the roof sounded like it was hammering my mind, making me think even more about my son. I imagined him in prison, alone, facing accusations he didn't deserve. Then, through the sound of the rain, I heard another noise, a muffled sob coming from Camilla's fourth-floor room. My heart softened. Maybe she was suffering too. Maybe she missed Daniel too. Even though I doubted her, I couldn't forget that she was my son's wife, and perhaps deep down, she was also tormented. I put on a sweater and left my room, intending to knock on her door and comfort her. But as I got closer, the crying stopped. Instead, I heard her voice, choked and trembling. "I didn't mean to do it. Don't force me." I held my breath, pressing my ear against the door, my heart pounding. She continued speaking, her voice full of fear. I just pushed him a little. It was his fault." A shiver ran through my entire body. Every word was like a needle piercing my chest. Who was she talking about? Mr. Thorne. A terrible truth began to take shape in my mind, although I didn't want to believe it. I stepped back, leaning against the wall so I wouldn't fall. My breathing became heavy. The air in the house seemed to have become dense. I returned to my room, closed the door, but couldn't sleep all night. Camilla's words kept repeating in my head like a warning. I was living under the same roof as someone who was hiding a dreadful secret. The next morning, I tried to behave normally. I went down to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, but my hands were shaking so much that I spilled flour all over the floor. Camilla came down too, her eyes a little swollen, but she forced a smile. "You're up early, Mother. I'll make you some coffee." I nodded without taking my eyes off her. At that moment, I understood that I couldn't stand idly by anymore. I had to act. I had to discover the truth. For Daniel, for this family. That's why when I saw Camilla go out to the yard and throw Daniel's memory box into the well, I didn't hesitate to retrieve it. I sat on the damp grass, my hands trembling, embracing that oak box. The night enveloped me with only a weak yellow light from the porch illuminating the scene, casting my elongated shadow on the ground. The box was icy, heavy with water, as if it contained all my family's pain. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in my heart. I carefully opened the box lid. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. Inside, wrapped in a worn velvet cloth, was a small black camera, compact but surprisingly heavy. I recognized it immediately. It was the camera Daniel had removed from his motorcycle, intending to repair it for reuse. My heart was pounding as if trying to escape my chest. Why had Camilla hidden that in Daniel's box, and why did she throw it into the well in the middle of the night? A freezing premonition ran down my back, but I knew I couldn't stop. I had to discover the truth, for Daniel, for my unjustly imprisoned son. I rushed the box inside the house, locked the back door, and went straight to Daniel's study. The small room, smelling of old wood and motor oil, was still intact from the day he left. I turned on his old laptop. The screen light illuminated my face in the darkness. My hands, accustomed to kneading bread, now trembled as they held the soaked camera. I dried it with a cloth with the same care one uses when touching something fragile. Then, with the little steadiness I had left, I took out the tiny memory card. It was icy, shining under the light. I inserted it into the reader, connected it to the computer, and waited. Every second felt like an eternity. A folder appeared on the screen with a single video file, named with a long series of numbers. I took a deep breath, my trembling hand on the mouse. "You have to do this," I whispered to myself, summoning the courage. I clicked and the screen flickered. A scene appeared. Mr. Thorne's office. I recognized it from the plaque with his name on the desk. The angle was high and diagonal, probably from a ceiling security camera. I heard a faint rubbing sound clear in the silence. Then Mr. Thorne's voice resonated, soft but charged with intent. "You know, Camilla, the company is having difficulties. It's time for you to pay me. Don't you remember, or would you prefer the truth to come out?" His tone chilled my blood, as if he were hiding something repulsive. I heard Camilla reply tremulously, almost pleading. "Mr. Thorne, I just ask for a little more time. Things haven't been good for me lately." Thorne's voice became brazen. "If you don't have the cash, pay me with your body, Camilla. It's a fair exchange." His words were like a stab. I unknowingly clenched my fists. I heard the screech of a chair, heavy footsteps, and then a struggle. Camilla screamed desperately, "Let go! Don't come near me!" The image trembled, but I managed to see Thorne grab her by the shoulder. Then a loud thwack filled the audio. Perhaps she had slapped him, and immediately a dull thump. Thorne fell backward, hitting his head on the edge of the desk, and lay motionless on the floor. Camilla stood there panting, her hair disheveled. She leaned over, checked if he was breathing, and backed away horrified, covering her mouth, unable to believe what had just happened. The video abruptly ended. The screen went black. I remained paralyzed, my whole body shaking. I covered my mouth with my hands, trying to stifle a sob. My daughter-in-law had defended herself, I understood, but then she chose to be silent. She chose to let Daniel, her husband, whom she swore to love all her life, bear all the blame. She not only caused a man's death, but also destroyed my son's life. Pain and rage surged through my chest as if trying to tear me apart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to Camilla's room right then and confront her. But I restrained myself because I knew that letting emotions guide me wouldn't help Daniel right now. I needed to think, to act carefully. I connected a USB drive to the laptop and saved the video, every movement slow, fearing that a mistake could make everything disappear. Then I deleted every trace from the computer, making sure no one would know what I had seen. That evidence, I knew, was the key to saving Daniel, to bringing my son back. The next morning at the break of dawn, I went down to the kitchen and started kneading bread as I did every day. The aroma of flour and butter floated in the air. Camilla came down while I was frying the bread. Her eyes were a little swollen as if she hadn't slept, but she forced a smile. "Did you sleep well, Mom? You look tired." Her voice was soft, but I felt a chill run down my spine. That smile, which once made me believe she was an attentive daughter-in-law, now seemed like just a mask. I nodded, trying to maintain a calm tone. "I couldn't sleep, Camilla. I'm worried about Daniel, and are you okay?" I watched her carefully, searching for some sign on her face. Camilla just nodded, her gaze drifting toward the door as if she were expecting something. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm just worried about him." But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and I knew she was lying. She ate breakfast quickly, just a few slices of bread, and immediately got up, taking her purse. "I have to leave early today, Mom. Something urgent at the office." I nodded and smiled, although my hands under the table were tightly clenched until they hurt. When the door closed behind her, I took a deep breath as if freeing myself from an invisible trap. I couldn't wait any longer. I put on a discreet coat and placed the USB drive in the inner pocket, right over my chest as a reminder of the duty I had. I took the bus to the precinct, my heart heavy but determined. On the way, I sat by the window watching people pass outside, unfamiliar faces, carefree smiles. And suddenly, I remembered my family's happy days. Daniel and Camilla used to sit together at the table, laughing while I watched them, full of joy. Now, all that was just a memory. I squeezed my coat pocket, feeling the small USB containing my son's fate. "Calm down, Rosa," I told myself quietly. "You have to do it for Daniel." Upon arriving at the precinct, I asked to speak with Agent Rodriguez. The duty officer, a young man with a suspicious look, observed me up and down. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked coldly. I straightened up, firm. "I have very important new evidence related to the Thorne case. I need to see Agent Rodriguez immediately." Perhaps it was the determination in my voice that convinced him. He picked up the phone, said something, and then nodded. "Wait a moment, please." Agent Rodriguez appeared a few minutes later, calm but with a sharp look. He led me to his office, not the cold interrogation room of the previous time. He placed a hot cup of tea in front of me. The warmth calmed my trembling hands. He sat down and looked at me with some compassion. "Mrs. Sterling, I understand you're going through a lot of pain. The case has progressed, but—" I interrupted the agent, unable to wait any longer. "Agent Rodriguez, my son is innocent, and I have the proof right here." I pulled the US drive from my jacket pocket, placed it on the table, and my voice trembled with emotion. "Please watch the whole video. It will explain everything." Rodriguez frowned, but didn't say anything. He connected the drive to the computer and put on headphones to maintain privacy. At first, his face remained calm, but I noticed his eyebrows gradually knitting together. His hands, which had been gently tapping the table, stopped. When the video ended, he remained silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on the black screen. Then he removed the headphones, looked at me, and said gravely, "Mrs. Sterling, where did you find this?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I told him everything, from my first suspicions to Camilla's strange behavior. I talked about how she had changed her routines, the secret calls in the middle of the night, the fearful murmur I heard while she was talking in her sleep. And finally, I told him about the night before, when I saw Camilla throw Daniel's wooden box into the well. "I knew it wasn't a coincidence," I said, my voice choked. "I had to get the box out, and inside I found this. I just want to save my son." Agent Rodriguez listened attentively, not missing a word. His fingers tapped the table gently, as if trying to organize the puzzle pieces in his mind. When I finished, he looked at me seriously, but without a trace of doubt. "Mrs. Sterling, this evidence completely changes the course of the case, but we must act cautiously. Camilla isn't just involved in the matter of Mr. Thorne. She could be implicated in even more serious things." He explained that according to the video, it seemed that Mira Thorne knew a secret about Camilla and used it to blackmail her. The words he spoke about the truth being revealed and paying with her body showed that Camilla was cornered. The secret calls, her late night outings, everything pointed to her hiding something bigger. "We need time to investigate," Rodriguez said, "but you've helped us tremendously." He looked me directly in the eyes, his voice firm but serene. "Mrs. Sterling, I need you to cooperate with us. Go back home and act as if nothing happened. We will transfer your son to a secure location. Your task will be to observe Camilla and notify us if you notice anything suspicious. We need time to cast the net." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anguish in my chest. Relief because Daniel would soon be exonerated, but anguish because I knew the battle wasn't over. "I will, Agent," I replied hoarsely. "I'll do whatever it takes to save my son." When I returned home after the meeting with Agent Rodriguez, the light of dusk filtered through the window, casting a golden hue on the living room that usually felt cold. I started tidying the house. I wiped the kitchen counter, arranged the dishes in the cupboard. Everything had to seem normal, as if I were still the mother worried about an unjustly accused son. I prepared dinner, a simple chicken soup, and the familiar aroma filled the house. I looked at the clock. It was almost time for Camilla to return. "Rosa, you must remain calm for Daniel," I told myself. Just as I had imagined, Camilla arrived home just as it was starting to get dark. She was carrying a box of pastries. She placed it on the table with a radiant smile. "I bought this for you, Mom. Eat it to regain your strength." Her voice sounded soft, but a shiver ran down my spine. That smile that once made me believe she was an attentive daughter-in-law now seemed like just a mask. I took the box and replied with a smile. "Thank you, Camilla. You're very thoughtful." But inside, I just wanted to scream, to ask her why she had betrayed Daniel, why she had pushed our family into this tragedy. During dinner, Camilla continued to play the role of the exemplary wife. She served me a piece of chicken and asked, "Is there any new news about Daniel, Mom? Did the lawyer say anything encouraging?" Her voice was sweet, but her eyes avoided mine, as if afraid I would discover something. I shook my head and let out a feigned sigh. "Nothing new, honey. The police are still investigating. I'm very worried. I just want Daniel to come home soon." Under the table, I clenched my phone tightly and sent a message to Agent Rodriguez. "She's home. She hasn't shown anything suspicious." I've had to keep my voice steady without letting a single drop of doubt escape. Around 8 o'clock, Camilla's phone vibrated. She quickly glanced at the screen and immediately got up to go out onto the balcony. "I have to take a call, Mom," she said, trying to sound calm. I nodded, pretending to go back to clearing the dishes, but as soon as she disappeared behind the glass door, I crept into the kitchen, from where I could hear her voice. She spoke in a low, nervous tone, as if restraining herself. "Okay, the same place at 9. Did you bring everything? It has to be closed this time." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would leap out of my chest. Closed? What was she talking about? I immediately wrote to Rodriguez. "She's going out. She has an appointment at 9. Camilla returned inside, her face tense, but masking it with a forced smile. She grabbed her purse and quickly said, "Mom, I have to go out for a moment to see a client. Lock the door tightly, please." Her lie flowed so naturally that I wanted to scream at her, to demand an explanation. But I restrained myself and only replied, "Be careful, honey." I stayed at the door, watching her figure disappear into the darkness. When the gate closed, I collapsed onto the sofa, hugging the phone, feeling as if the whole world weighed on my shoulders. Time passed slowly. Every minute dragged on like an hour. I sat with my eyes fixed on the clock, gripping the phone, waiting. Every noise in the street, every gust of wind passing through the door, crack made me jump. I thought of Daniel, of his desperate look when they took him away in handcuffs. I repeated to myself, "Just a little longer, son. You'll be back soon." But the fear wouldn't leave me. If Agent Rodriguez's plan failed, all my hope would crumble. Exactly 1 hour later, my phone vibrated. I flinched and almost dropped it. A message from Agent Rodriguez appeared on the screen, short and clear. "Mrs. Sterling, we have them." Camilla and an accomplice were arrested in the act while carrying out an unverified money transaction. "Thank you for your cooperation." I read and reread those words, unable to believe it. The phone slipped from my hands and fell softly onto the rug. Tears welled up, not from fear or pain as in the previous days, but from relief. The storm had passed, and finally the light was beginning to break through. The final hearing of the trial took place a cold morning a few weeks later. Daniel and I sat in the front row reserved for family inside a solemn room full of people. Across the aisle, Mr. Thorne's family sat in a row. Their looks toward us were a mixture of hatred and curiosity. I took Daniel's hand. It was ice cold. He didn't say anything, just looked at the floor as if trying to avoid the stares pointed at him. I whispered, "Son, stay calm. The truth will come out today." Daniel nodded, but I knew that a painful battle was raging inside him. The trial began. The prosecutor stood up and firmly presented the collected evidence. Then came the moment I had waited for. The hidden camera video was projected on a large screen in the middle of the room. Everyone was silent. Mr. Thorne's repulsive voice boomed, every word like a stab. "If you don't have the cash, pay me with your body, Camila." Camila's desperate scream was heard, the struggle, and finally a dull thud when Mr. Thorne fell and his head hit the edge of the desk. When the video ended, the room erupted in murmurs. Mr. Thorne's family lowered their heads. Some covered their mouths, ashamed of the man's actions. Camilla was led to the stand. She wore the gray prisoner's uniform. Her long, once shiny hair was now tied in a bun. She looked haggard, aged by years, with swollen eyes and an empty gaze. When the judge asked her to testify, her voice was hoarse and trembling, as if every word cost her enormous effort. "Your Honor, I didn't mean to do it," she began, and her voice broke. I stood there looking at the woman who was once my family's pride, now before the court, and I felt my heart shrink. Camilla confessed that she had been tricked by some friends into investing in a fraudulent financial platform, which led her to accrue serious debts. "I didn't dare to tell Daniel," she said, looking down. "I was afraid of disappointing him. He always believed I was a perfect wife." Her words made Daniel squeeze my hand hard. I could feel his pain in each of his fingers. Camilla continued, her voice growing more and more shaky. In desperation, "I discovered that Mr. Thorne was running a money laundering network within the company. I stole some important documents, thinking I could blackmail him to settle my debts. But Mr. Thorne was not easy to manipulate. He discovered what I had done and used my secret about the debts to threaten and extort me. He demanded repulsive things," she said, almost on the verge of tears. "I couldn't take it." That fateful night, after leaving the office at her usual time, Camilla secretly returned, carrying the documents, hoping to beg Mr. Thorne to forgive her. But he didn't keep his word, and when he tried to assault her, Camilla pushed him in a panic. "I just wanted him to stop," she sobbed. "I didn't imagine he would fall so hard." Realizing Mr. Thorne had died, Camilla panicked. Instead of calling the police, she decided to hide it. Thanks to her technical knowledge from her administrative job, she broke into the security room and deleted the video, showing her entering the office. She copied the complete record onto Daniel's mini camera, planning to get rid of it by throwing it into the well. "I thought it would disappear forever," she said in a hollow voice. But when the police arrived home and suspicions fell on Daniel, Camilla let everything follow that course. "I was afraid, too afraid," she confessed, tears rolling down her cheeks. Camilla testified that after Daniel was arrested, she had to continue negotiating with the money laundering partners to pay off the debts. The secret calls, the late-night outings, all were part of that plan. She reviewed the video to make sure she had erased all evidence and then threw the camera into the well. She didn't imagine that act would become the proof that revealed everything. After the confession, the prosecutor presented more evidence about the money laundering network Camilla was involved in. Agent Rodriguez stood up and confirmed that she and an accomplice had been arrested the previous night. The judge remained silent, taking notes, and then looked at Camilla. "Do you wish to say anything before the court deliberates?" Camilla shook her head, tears falling. "I just want to say I'm sorry, Daniel, and I'm sorry, Mom." I looked at her, feeling empty. Daniel was next to me, not saying a word, turning his face away when Camilla passed in front of us. Her gaze, full of remorse and desperation, crossed ours, but Daniel didn't respond. He knew the wound in his heart was too deep, something a simple apology couldn't heal. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge declared, "Daniel Sterling is completely innocent and is immediately freed." The gavel strike echoed, and I hugged Daniel tightly, tears streaming down my face. My son squeezed me back and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have become of me." But I just shook my head, unable to speak, because joy mixed with pain. As for Camilla, the court sentenced her to 18 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter and participation in money laundering. Her partner also received a just sentence. Upon hearing the conviction, Camilla collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The guards helped her up and escorted her out of the room. As she passed by me, I watched her back move away without feeling relief, only a strange emptiness. A family that was once happy had fallen apart in a way no one could have foreseen. A few months passed since the trial, and my son's life and mine slowly began to regain their rhythm, but I knew nothing would ever be the same. The scars left by the storm called Camilla were still there, hidden in Daniel's heart and mine. Every morning when I woke up, the house felt emptier, as if a piece of its soul was missing. But I learned that sometimes peace only comes when we accept losses and move on. Daniel decided to quit his job at the company shortly after being released. "Mom, I can't go back there," he told me one afternoon as we sat on the sofa. "Every corner of the office, every hallway reminds me of those days. I can't bear it." His voice sounded sad, his gaze evasive. But I understood. That company wasn't just a workplace. It was also the stage where the shadows of Thorne and Camilla's betrayal had taken root. I just nodded, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you do, son, I'll support you. All I want is for you to find peace." The small bakery, which had been closed during the days of chaos, reopened its doors. The familiar sound of the small bell resonated every time someone entered, bringing a tiny spark of joy. The aroma of wheat, cinnamon, and baked butter spread throughout the street as a reminder that life continues. Behind the counter, I kneaded, rolled, and baked golden loaves, as I had done for decades. But now, the bakery was not just my job, but also my sanctuary, the place where I tried to mend the broken pieces of my family. Daniel began helping me at the shop. At first, he only did small tasks, delivering orders, cleaning the counter, or arranging the oven trays. I watched him work in silence, not saying much, but his eyes were slowly regaining their light. One day, I decided to teach him to make bread. "Daniel, come here," I called him, handing him a mass of dough. "I'm going to teach you how to knead. Making bread isn't hard, but you have to be patient." He smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen in days. "Mom, I'm an electrical engineer. Now I'm going to dedicate myself to making bread," he joked, though he rolled up his sleeves and started kneading. I watched his rough hands, accustomed to holding screwdrivers and wires, now clumsy as he spread the dough, and I couldn't help but laugh. Once he dropped all the flour on the floor and blushed. "Mom, I'm useless," he muttered. But I shook my head. "No, son, you're just learning. I also covered the floor with flour when I started." Little by little, Daniel began to enjoy it. He learned to bake golden loaves, whip up smooth creams, and even decorate cakes with clumsy but charming flowers. Every time I saw him concentrating with the pastry bag, my heart filled with warmth. The bakery was healing our wounds. One morning, after cleaning the shop, I prepared 2 cups of coffee, one for me and one to place on the chair opposite mine, where Camilla used to sit. I didn't do it to remember her, but to remind myself of a valuable lesson. A lie, no matter how deeply hidden, always ends up coming to light. The wooden box at the bottom of the well, though submerged in darkness, was rescued by the clarity of day, and the truth, however painful, freed Daniel, me, and our entire family. I took a sip of coffee, looked out the window, and saw the morning light filtering in, bringing with it a new air of hope. One afternoon, as we were cleaning the shop together, Daniel stopped, dried his hands on his apron, and looked at me. "Mom," he said firmly, "I think I want to keep the bakery. I want to continue it, to make good pastries with you." I was surprised, and then I smiled, tears silently running down my face. "Son, I just want you to be happy. If this bakery brings you joy, then it's yours." Daniel approached, hugged me, and in that embrace, I felt his strength returning. Outside, the sunset sun tinged the entire street with gold. People passed by, children laughed, and the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air. Everything seemed like a picture of peace. The storm had passed, leaving scars, yes, but also a new sky for us. Standing behind the counter, I watched Daniel carefully arrange the loaves on the shelves and knew that no matter how painful the past had been, together we would move forward under the light of a new dawn. After all those storms, I understood that life sometimes doesn't give us the right to choose what kind of tempests will arrive, but it always allows us to decide how to stand firm amidst them. There are truths that, however painful they are, must be faced because only the light of truth can free the human being from the darkness of lies and fear. I understood that blind faith is sometimes the knife with which one wounds oneself, and that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive without honesty. But above all, I understood that a mother's love, that love without conditions or calculations, is the only thing strong enough to guide us through all loss and all suffering. After all, I just want to say one thing: never fear the truth, because it is the beginning of the peace we seek. The story you have just heard has changed names and locations to protect the identity of the people involved. We do not tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and pauses to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own home? I sincerely wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to maintain peace? Or would you have the courage to face everything to reclaim your own voice? I want to know your opinion because every story can become a candle that lights the path for another. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Right now, on the final screen, I'll leave two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.